Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from tonight? I'm glad you're here. Settle in, get comfortable, and let's drift back to a slower America, when Sunday was the quietest day. It begins with a hush that isn't silence so much as space. Space between footsteps, between thoughts, between the steady ticks of a kitchen clock. Sunday, in so many American towns and cities, once felt like the country's long exhale. The streets look the same as Saturdays. Same bricks, same neon signs, same bus stop bench. But the energy had dialed down. The light seemed softer, as if the sun cupped its hand over the day. Even the air felt padded, like sound travelling through a thick winter coat. Front lawns and stoops told the story before anyone spoke. Cars stayed home, their hoods cool beneath the maples. The paper lay fat with comics and coupons beside a bottle of milk, a split rubber band snaking across the porch boards. Somewhere inside, a kettle clicked off and a radio murmured, low and tinny, like a neighbour telling you a secret from across the fence. The smell of coffee, of bacon, of something sweet in the oven, moved lazily through rooms that weren't in a rush to go anywhere. You could walk through the centre of town and feel it. The hardware store slept behind a drawn shade. The barber's pole was still, stripes caught in a polite spiral that never turned. The bakery might have sold out by 9 and then locked up with a hand-lettered sign that promised, "See you Monday." The drugstore lights were dim. Main Street wasn't closed to cars exactly, it just didn't tempt them. A lone pickup ambled by, not because it had to, but because someone liked the habit of driving slow with the window down. Families treated time differently. The morning wasn't counted in minutes, but in moments, flipping pancakes slowly enough to make them perfect circles, rinsing berries in a colander and listening to the gentle patter, smoothing the Sunday comics across the table and leaving ink on your fingertips. There was a ritual to the way the house unfolded. Sheets breathed cool air at open windows. Shoes were lined up, polished from the night before. A dress hung ready on a closet door. Children learned the choreography by watching the tiptoe, the whisper, the careful closing of a latch so it wouldn't click too loud. Outside, the world offered fewer choices, and that somehow gave everyone more freedom. When almost nothing asked for your attention, you discovered how to give attention on purpose, to the way the breeze lifted the corner of a flag, to the precise tone of a church bell, different from the school's bell, deeper and rounder, calling not to urgency but to gathering, to a bicycle's chain softened by oil, spinning a steady hush along a quiet curb. In cities, the pause had a different flavour but the same effect. You could hear it on a subway platform that was never crowded, the announcements echoing without competing voices. You could see it on avenues where taxis coasted and crosswalks emptied all at once. The walk sign blinking to an audience of just a few. The skyline didn't shrink, but it felt farther away, a picture rather than a demand. A newsstand might still be open, its owner leaning on an elbow, chatting with whoever wandered up, the stack of thick Sunday papers like bricks building a little fort against the rush of the week. In small towns, the pause wore denim and lawn clippings. Lawn chairs appeared as if from nowhere, aligned in patient rows on porches. Dogs napped with their noses on their paws, opening one eye only when the mail truck, which didn't run, failed to come. Sidewalk chalk bloomed in cool pastels, hopscotch squares, lopsided suns, a careful attempt at a horse that always turned out a bit like a dog. You could stand on the corner and recognise every car that rolled by, and if you didn't, somebody else did and told a story about it. What made the day feel so roomy wasn't just quiet. It was coordination. A whole country, without a formal meeting and without a memo, agreed to touch the brakes at the same time. The feeling wasn't identical everywhere. Some places stayed lively near parks and ball fields, others kept their downtown sleepy but their kitchens busy. Yet the baseline softened. It was like listening to an orchestra stop in flawless unison, the last note hanging while everyone holds their breath. In that suspended second, you can hear the room itself. Sunday felt like that second stretched into hours. At home, clocks had their own pace. You notice things typically lost a hurry. The soft, clumsy dignity of a toddler carrying a glass of orange juice with both hands, the way dust wells up and glows in a shaft of mid-morning light. The far-off train's horn, which on weekdays sounds like logistics but on Sunday sounds like story. A book that sat all week under a stack of mail became the most important thing in the house. A puzzle that hadn't been opened in months begged to be spread across the table. Somebody napped without apology, the kind of nap that unfolds like a blanket, not the kind you steal between alarms. The soundscape of the day carried human scale. Someone practiced a piano slowly, counting under their breath. A hose clicked on, water striking the inside of a metal can before spilling out in a curved, steady sheet. A door creaked, not because it needed fixing, but because it had a personality. Somewhere, a radio called a ball game in that friendly cadence that leaves room between plays for you to think. Even laughter was different. It came in small bursts, then faded back into the wider quiet, as if the day itself was a neighbour who loved a joke but didn't want to wake the baby. Meals gathered people without drama. Breakfast lingered until it began to resemble lunch and nobody minded. Plates travelled slowly from table to sink. Someone washed, someone dried, and conversation slid around the edges like a skater, tracing gentle loops. The week ahead sat politely at the doorway, waiting its turn while the day drifted from morning into afternoon with no hard corners to bump into. You didn't schedule rest. Rest happened because the world forgot to ask for anything else. Even errands, if they existed, learned to bow to the mood. A drive to the park turned into a park bench and then into watching a single grey squirrel attempt a series of questionable decisions. A trip to the lake became skimming stones and counting the ripples as if rehearsing for nothing in particular. In a grocery store, if it happened to be open, the aisles felt like library stacks. People pushed carts like strollers, protective, unhurried, reading labels as if they were short stories. The pause showed up in little courtesies too, shoulders dropped, hellos stretched. A store clerk said, "Take your time," and meant it. A passing wave lasted a fraction longer, enough to make clear it wasn't a reflex. Patience, which is the first casualty of speed, returned to health. Behind the wheel, drivers yielded with a faint, almost embarrassed smile, relieved to remember that brakes do more than prevent disaster. They create grace. All of this testing didn't feel like a rule so much as an agreement with your own nervous system. People who spent the week making, selling, fixing, planning, hands raw from boxes, eyes tired from screens, backs sore from hours on their feet, occupied their bodies differently. They stretched without calling it stretching. They stared into space without calling it meditation. They went on walks without mapping mileage. You could feel an older rhythm rising from beneath the asphalt, the human tempo that existed before store hours and train timetables, and the ping of a new message. Nature partnered with the day in a way that felt conspiratorial. The breeze moved more deliberately. Birds sang like they had the stage alone. Clouds formed long, slow caravans across the sky. Even the sun appeared to idle just above the horizon longer than usual, as if checking to make sure the day had done its job. The evening's first crickets rehearsed early, and their song sounded like approval. There was also a certain honesty to the quiet. It didn't pretend the world had no troubles, it simply made room for a different response to them. Instead of the reflex to fix, there was the practice of noticing, the squeak in the stair that tells you something needs oil, the letter you've been meaning to write, the way a photograph on the mantel asks to be dusted, and, while you're at it, remembered. Small repairs, small kindnesses, small recognitions. No one of them urgent. All of them important. If you listened closely, you could hear the week aligning itself, not through lists but by feel. Shoes near the door, a clean shirt on its hanger, gas in the car, lunch boxes airing out on the counter. None of it hounded you. It waited, friendly as a neighbour leaning over the fence to say tomorrow. The mind, given a day without alarms, did a quiet kind of sorting all by itself, the way a river clears after a heavy rain when the silt finally settles and you can see the stones at the bottom again. And in that clarity, something tender had a chance to surface. People sat together with outdone tasks. They looked at one another like landmarks instead of obstacles. A grandparent told a story that wasn't on any calendar. A teenager, newly tall and newly quiet, leaned against the kitchen island and stayed. A father paused with his hand on the back of a chair, just that, before moving on. The house hummed at a lower pitch, and in that lower pitch, everything that belonged there sounded right, like a record finding its groove and staying true all the way through the middle of the song, the needle steady, the music unhurried, the room holding every note as if it were the first. It wasn't only a feeling, it was a pattern, laid into the week like threads woven through cloth. Long before storefront signs and union breaks, the idea of a day that didn't belong to labour began with a story. 6 days of making, 1 day of not. People told that story to their children at kitchen tables and from wooden pulpits, and the story told the people how to live. In the Hebrew tradition, the 7th day unfurled from sundown to sundown. A lamp-lit island of bread, blessing, and quiet, where matches slept and money went unused, where the pace of the cosmos seemed to slow to match the cadence of prayer. The Christian day followed close by, a Sunday kept for worship and ease, the first morning of the week set aside to remember what mattered before the lists began. Across centuries and oceans, that design arrived in America and took root with particular confidence. In certain towns you could chart the whole week by the approaching hush. Saturday was for stacking cordwood and sweeping steps, for polishing shoes and starching shirts, for baking the bread that would not be needed on the morrow. It was for making the house ready, not because guests were coming, but because stillness was. Lamps were filled, casseroles arranged, toys gathered into baskets so small hands would not have to search. The one who always fixed borrowed time finally set the tools down on purpose, not out of exhaustion but conviction. Sunday morning had a choreography learned without rehearsal. Bells did not only announce a service, they summoned a memory older than each listener. The little brass ones inside kitchens chimed against porcelain and larger iron mouths and steeples answered, their sound travelling through elms and over rooftops, across fields where dew turned to sparkles one blade at a time. People came in their chosen best, not always for fashion, but as a gesture. This day is different. I am different in it. Families stepped onto sidewalks as if onto a slow-moving parade. Hats, gloves, a hand in a hand, everyone keeping time with the bell. In wooden meeting houses of New England, the plainness was a virtue. Walls whitewashed to keep the heart's attention. The sermon could be long enough to make the sun move, but people stood under its weight willingly, trusting that a day heavy with words would make the rest of the week lighter. In country chapels with clappered siding, the hymns rose like warm air, carrying the harmony of neighbours who shared seed, borrowed ladders, traded pies. In brick city parishes, incense curled in quiet ribbons while stained glass made the floor a quilt of colour where everyday shoes suddenly walked on red and gold. In black churches born of sorrow and dance, the Sabbath was a shelter and a launch. A drumbeat stitched the room together, voices clasped hands in mid-air, and the sermon was not only thought but fuel. Rest here meant more than a nap. It meant dignity reclaimed, a place where names were pronounced rightly and the future could be spoken out loud. In immigrant parishes, Polish, Italian, Irish, Mexican, the language of prayer braided with new street names, and Sunday dinner travelled in from the old country inside pots that had crossed oceans. The Sabbath was a passport stamped every week, reminding families who they were while they learned who they were becoming. Farm towns kept the day with a practical piety. Cows still needed milking, but the hands that did it moved with a gentler grip. Fences could wait. Tractors stayed quiet unless a storm had promised trouble. Children learned that rest did not mean nothing happened. It meant only the necessary happened, and even the necessary bowed its head. Mill towns observed the Sabbath like a ceasefire in a long campaign. The shriek of the whistle paused. Soot settled. Shirts that smelled of oil hung by the back door, and the lungs had one day to remember clean air. The sound of a hymn in a town that made things of steel could make the throat ache with a strange kind of mercy. Rules took on local colour. In one county, a baseball game after church counted as fellowship. In another, it was considered noise that could jostle the day's quiet. Some kitchens simmered all afternoon with roasts set low at dawn. Others refused the stove altogether and made sandwiches from yesterday's roast, honouring the work already done. Sometimes you could not buy a hammer, not because hammers were rare, but because the shopkeeper believed your fence could wait one more day. The law wrote some of this down, lists of what could be sold and what could not, hours that must remain dark, but much of it was enforced by nods, the communal memory of what felt right. At home, the design of rest showed up in little liturgies. A tablecloth that only appeared on Sundays, a sugar bowl filled to the top, candles lit not for romance but for reverence, a Bible or missal open to a ribbon where the week had left off, a chair moved near a window because that's where the light was best for reading, and reading was work of a holier sort. Children recognised the difference. The way voices softened, the way footsteps sounded like they remembered other people lived here too. Even laughter respected the contour of the day, rising and falling in friendly waves that never became a storm. There were prohibitions, of course, the edges drawn to preserve the middle. No unnecessary labour, which could mean no laundry flapping on the line, no hammer's echo, no ledgers opened. For some, no cards or dancing, for others, no hunting, no fishing with hooks that made creatures struggle. Yet the shape of the Sabbath was more than the fences around it. It was the pasture inside. It was a day set apart not as a museum exhibit, but as a living room for the soul. Even those who bristled at rules often found themselves keeping the spirit of the day, lingering at breakfast, taking the long path to the park, letting a nap find them without apology. Businesses adjusted their pulse to match the design. The bank, unblinking all week, closed its eyes. The post stayed home, the pharmacist, the grocer, the cobbler, each one a metronome for the town, fell silent for a measured beat. A traveller arriving on Sunday learned patience at the depot bench, hat tilted over eyes, ticket tucked away like a promise delayed. A salesman with samples in a satchel discovered that the front door was not for knocking today. He would sit under a tree and learn the names of birds before he learned the names on his order form. The Sabbath taught people to live in time rather than chase it. 6 days bent toward goals, and the 7th bent toward meaning. Workdays stacked like bricks, the Sabbath opened like a window. If the week was a ladder, a day was the ground you stepped back onto to remember why you were climbing. Rest here did not erase duty, it tuned it. After a day spent inhabiting the centre of things, even Monday's hardest tasks could feel like service rather than sentence. Communities that kept the Sabbath discovered that restraint can be generative. A field left fallow grows rich. A voice that rests returns with more to say. Not everyone kept it the same, and not everyone kept it at all, but the idea had a way of seeping beyond belief. A diner owner who never went to church still flipped the closed sign because his mother had, and because the waitresses deserved an afternoon with their feet up. A streetcar conductor pocketed his cap and walked home through the slowest streets just to feel the world at half speed. A young couple with no rituals of their own invented some, A walk to the river, a book exchanged, a promise to leave the sink full and the argument empty until tomorrow. Even the architecture seemed to nod to the design. Steeples-oriented neighbourhoods like sundials, their shadows marking hours no clock sold. Benches out front gave the day a place to sit after the service let out, while friends compared recipes and the weather forecast, which seemed to speak more softly on Sundays. Stained glass threw colour not only onto pews but onto the faces that sat in them, stitching people to stories in light. In towns with no churches, the park gazebo or the Grange Hall carried the same gentle authority. Here is where we gather. Here is where the weak bows its head. The Sabbath trained attention as surely as work trained skill. It taught hands to be still without being idle, hearts to be open without being exposed. It taught a room to hold silence comfortably, and a conversation to tolerate space. It let grief sit in a chair beside joy without being hurried out. It let gratitude spill from ordinary containers, jam jars, pot holders, porch steps, without ceremony. It gave people practice in noticing the divine inside the domestic, the way steam rose from soup like incense, the way a child's hair smelled like grass, the way a worn hymnal remembered the touch of older thumbs. And underneath all these habits lay a logic that an exhausted country could understand even if it forgot the scriptures that first carried it. Humans are not machines. A good life requires margins. If the mind is a field, it needs edges unploughed. If the heart is a house, it needs a room that paperwork cannot enter. The Sabbath drew those lines with a pencil and a smile, then invited everyone to colour inside at their own pace. It was rest by design, yes, but also rest by consent. A communal agreement that for one day the story of the week would not be production but presence, not accumulation but attention, not urgency but blessing. Quiet didn't just happen. It was drafted, debated, codified and tacked onto bulletin boards beside town hall notices about dog licenses and spring planting. A shopkeeper might have hung a handwritten placard that said "Close Sunday," but behind those two words lay entire chapters of municipal codes and state statutes, some inherited from colonial charters, some sharpened by 20th century politics, many carrying the old phrase, "works of necessity or charity." The spirit was plain. The seventh day should be different. And if custom wasn't enough to make it so, the law would lend a careful hand. The rules varied like dialects. In one county you could buy milk, medicine, and a newspaper, but not a hammer. In another, gasoline was allowed, but motor oil wasn't, as if speed could be granted without the means to maintain it. A department store might be permitted to sell baby clothes, but not men's hats, coffee, but not a percolator, envelopes, but not the writing desk they'd sit upon. Texas once kept a ledger of forbidden Sunday goods so oddly specific it read like a scavenger hunt gone wrong. Washers and dryers, clocks and cameras, jewellery and lawnmowers, creating a puzzle aisle by aisle, where the borders between need and want grew as intricate as lace. Clerks learned the choreography. "I can ring up your bread and aspirin, ma'am, but the lamp will have to wait until Monday." At the heart of these codes lived a compromise between reverence and practicality. Necessity became a word roomy enough to hold farms and hospitals, trains and telephones, a handful of diners, and the one druggist who always answered the bell. Charity covered soup kitchens and visiting the sick, casseroles carried beneath quilted pot holders, and church ladies stacking folding chairs after the last amen. Everything else, commerce that could be postponed without harm, was asked to sleep. Policemen wrote gentle summonses to merchants who tested the boundaries. Judges decided whether a Sunday matinee was culture or commerce, whether a baseball game uplifted the town or unsettled it. The calendar did as much work as the clock. In New England, the old Puritan backbone showed through the statute books like an X-ray. Massachusetts' Lord's Day provisions once read as if they had been carved into the meeting house door. forbidding trade and labour with the solemnity of a creed. Pennsylvania and New Jersey drafted similar lines. Southern towns wrapped their ordinances in hospitality and hymnals, less flinty but no less firm. Doors latched at noon. Blinds turned to the angle that signals we're home, but not to business. Plain states, practical by necessity, wrote in exceptions for weather and cattle and harvest, recognising that thunderheads and carving don't check the day of the week before they come calling. Enforcement had a human face. The sheriff who wore his hat low all week walked slower on Sundays, and if he wrote a ticket, he did so like a note slipped into a suggestion box. We all agreed to this, remember? Sometimes a rival shopkeeper made the call not out of malice but out of fairness. If I closed, so should you. Sometimes no one called at all because the town, like a family, preferred the subtle power of a raised eyebrow to the louder sting of a fine. The law in those places was less a hammer than a level. It kept the surface even so no one's conscience had to carry the whole load. Of course, edges frayed. A Jewish grocer who closed on Saturday for the Sabbath might open on Sunday to survive, and the law would meet his need with the rigidity of a rule drafted without his life in mind. Courtrooms filled with the friction of pluralism, merchants in yarmulkes and ministers in collars, mill workers in union jackets and mayors in suits, all arguing about what rest means in a country where not everyone keeps the same holy day. Judges reached for secular reasons to uphold the quiet, order, welfare, a shared day off, so the peace of Sunday could exist even for those who didn't name it sacred. The rationale shifted like sunlight, but the outcome often held. The sign stayed flipped to closed. Sports carried their own skirmishes. In some towns, Sunday baseball was a sin until it became a fundraiser. Then suddenly, the crack of a bat could sound like civic virtue. Churches let out early on summer days when the high school made the playoffs, and an ordinance that once frowned at crowds now smiled at them, provided the game started after a certain hour and ended before the light turned honey gold. Theatres learned the same dance, curtains that rose at 1 o'clock by law, as if the town itself were drawing a breath between worship and entertainment. Alcohol was a clock within the clock. Some counties banned Sunday sales completely. Others allowed them only afternoon, a tacit nod to the sanctity of morning. For bartenders, it turned the day into a tide chart. Low ebb at breakfast, a cautious swell at brunch, a fine for anyone who poured a minute too soon. Package stores sat dark like closed books. The rattle of ice in a glass belonged to living rooms and back patios, not public bars, and if you forgot and knocked anyway, you learned your habits by the polite refusal of a locked door. The patchwork produced scenes that can seem comic in hindsight but felt consequential in the moment. A father with a squeaky screen door stood in the hardware aisle on a Sunday afternoon, holding a screw that didn't quite fit, and found himself staring at a sign that said no sales today, by ordinance. He went home, dabbed oil on the hinge, and called it good enough until Monday. A bride whose toaster gave up the ghost the morning after her wedding held off, replacing it for a day, discovering what bread tastes like toasted under a broiler, a small inconvenience transformed into a story. A car dealer gazed across a lot full of chrome and flags and watched the wind do all the moving because the law had decided that selling a dream on wheels should never be urgent. For workers, the legal quiet was a shield. The waitress who smiled through 6 mornings of coffee refills and burnt toast knew the 7th would be lighter, and often hers. The clerk whose feet ached inside sensible shoes could plan for a real day off without fearing that a boss would keep the lights on to chase one more week's numbers. Unions pointed to blue laws as allies, not adversaries, a rare place where the state said out loud, rest is not laziness, it is policy. For families, predictability turned into ritual. If your town didn't sell on Sunday, you shopped on Saturday, and the list took on the satisfying weight of preparedness. Extra eggs, a roast to go low and slow, flour for biscuits, oil for the lamp, ice for lemonade. As the century wore on, the edges of the legal Sabbath softened. Malls arrived like great indoor weather systems, and towns negotiated. Open the doors, but perhaps not all of them. Sell what you must, but not everything. Begin at noon, not 9. Courts revisited old arguments with new language. Legislatures amended lists, then exemptions, then the exemptions to the exemptions. The map grew paler in places, but never blank. Even today, in certain states, car lots stay still on Sundays, their rows as orderly as pews. In others, liquor jibs remain politely quiet until lunchtime, as if the clock keeps a little piece of the covenant. A handful of communities still tuck specialty shops into a legal hammock and let them sway there once a week, content to trade a little commerce for a lot of calm. Beneath the shifting rules, the purpose persisted, to shape desire into something livable. Blue laws did not claim that work was bad, they claimed that unchecked work was a kind of weather that erodes the spirit. So they sandbagged the week with a line in the law and called it rest. The language could be clumsy, the enforcement uneven, the exception sometimes comic, but the net effect was audible. Streets thinned, doors latched, time exhaled. And because the quiet was official, people stepped into it with fewer apologies, like entering a park whose green lawns are not a suggestion, but an invitation maintained by the city for all. If you listen closely, you can still hear the architecture of those rules in the way Sunday feels in many places. The late openings, the drowsy mornings, the pause around noon, when towns shift from hurry to hum. The law once made that shape. Habit and memory often keep it, even where the statute books have moved on. The presence of a line, once bright blue, now drawn in softer pencil, continues to outline the day, reminding an always-on country that a little legal quiet can teach the rest of the week how to speak more gently. Main Street learned how to sleep without going dark. Even with the sun up, the storefronts closed their eyes in ways you could see if you paid attention. The neon open sign at the diner wasn't broken, it simply didn't hum. The barber's pole, all peppermint whirl and promise, stood like a lollipop forgotten on a windowsill. A bell over a door waited in the quiet as if it remembered yesterday's voices and was content to keep them. You could stand in the middle of the block and notice the town's held breath, the kind of pause that makes you aware of your own footsteps, suddenly too loud on the familiar sidewalk. The life of the street drifted into the windows, displays that shouted during the week now whispered. In the shoe store, brown Oxfords and white sneakers stood shoulder to shoulder behind glass, their laces tucked in like little tongues. A dress shop posed its mannequins in mid-turn, fabric frozen in a twirl that would resume on Monday. The hardware store arranged its bins of nails like glittering gravel fields under a fluorescent sky that wasn't turned on, each label card written in the neat block letters of a person who cares about order. Even the toy store's chrome wind-up robots and stuffed bears seemed to soften, eyes less glossy, as if they could nap standing up. Signs did a lot of the talking. Closed Sunday, in script and block letters, on slate boards and sun-faded cardstock, taped inside with the corners curling. Some added a small apology, gone to church, family day and see you Monday. Tiny notes that turned commerce into correspondence. A few were practically open 7 to 12 only. Ice sold until 10, simple. Pharmacy on call. The best ones had a sense of personality, the kind of whimsy a busy week doesn't have time for. Resting like our bread. Even God took a day off. Back when the roast is too. The sounds rearranged themselves. With no doors thudding and no registers chiming, you could hear the invisible architecture, the soft tick of a thermostat inside the bakery, the faint hum of a drink cooler allowed to keep a lonely vigil, the whisper of the HVAC turning over once an hour in the department store, stirring dust motes into slow constellations. Outside, gutters clicked in a lazy breeze, The traffic lights cycled dutifully for an audience of sparrows. The click-click of a cyclist's freewheel echoed longer than physics seemed to require. The diner's counter stools stood upside down on their heads in some towns, chrome legs making a hedge along the formica. In others, the stools stayed upright for a short breakfast and then went still, the coffee pot empty to the last dark drip, the griddle scraped clean until it shone like a small moon. A waitress with her apron folded in half might sit at a booth for once and stir her own sugar, not someone else's. The pie case spun slowly on leftover momentum and then stopped. A handwritten note told latecomers there'd be pancakes again tomorrow, circles as perfect as the week could hope for. Barber shops knew how to be quiet. Capes hung like sleeping flags. Jars of blue barbicide turned the combs into fish in a tidy aquarium. The chairs, thrones on weekdays, sat with their footrests up as if they too needed to stretch. In the window, a tin of talc waited beside a brush with a carved wooden handle smoothed by 100 thumbs. The mirror reflected an empty room, and in that reflection you could see yourself as a person who might carry dignity into Monday. The pharmacy darkened its aisles to a twilight, but left the back light on, a square of brightness signalling the on-call promise. The soda fountain, if there was still one, had its metal spouts polished to mistake-free Glass jars full of candy stood like stained glass windows on a lower shelf. Lemon drops, red hots, butterscotch, all patient as planets. You could imagine the clink of a nickel even if the drawer wouldn't open to receive it. In the fragrance aisle, boxed soaps and colognes waited like sealed letters from people you would eventually grow up to be. The bank was the quietest building of all, street-side vault to the town's bloodstream. The lobby plants drooped just enough to look off duty. Pens on chains lay parallel to the edge of the counter, their little beaded links like jewellery set aside for a nap. Behind thick doors, the vault slept with the confidence of a bull in a paddock. Safety deposit boxes kept their secrets without sway. On the sidewalk, the night deposit chute looked like the mouth of a mail slot that hadn't learned to speak on Sundays. At the 5 and dime, the aisles waited like hallways between thoughts. Aluminum pie tins nested into silver spirals, clothespins stood in their paper sleeves, soldiers at ease, cotton thread, dozens of colours in neat stacks, held the light like small candies, but offered no temptation, because the temptation here was not consumption but order, and order can rest. The floor, polished by 100 broom handles and mops, reflected the wordless ceiling fans, still, but ready to start when summer insisted. Grocery stores told time with their emptiness. In places that kept a short Sunday, the produce racks were a study in absence, a low mountain of potatoes, a handful of onions, one stubborn head of lettuce, the red and white checkerboard of a strawberry crate where strawberries had been. The loudspeaker was good as a librarian. The one open register might belong to the owner's grown child home from college, face gently bored, scanning slowly, the beep softened by the mood of the day. Elsewhere, the doors stayed locked, and the glass let you look at abundance on pause, milk like white bricks, eggs stacked in pale geometry, cereal boxes saluting with cartoon fate as practicing their patience. The movie theatre wore its sleep like makeup left on overnight. The marquee declared last night's show, some romance, some explosion, a hero's name, but the bulbs didn't race around the edges. The ticket booth, a tiny aquarium where a person swims all week, stood empty. The little spinny stool tucked under the counter like a secret. Posters lined the corridor inside, faces mid-drama, stalled at the edge of action. Popcorn machines, a smell more than a device, were dark and clean. The glass panels reflecting a methodical chandelier that trusted the room to be pretty even without a crowd. In the tailor's window, a measuring tape coiled into a sleeping snake on the table. Chalk circles on a pinned jacket collar held the outline of a change that could wait. Shears rested open, mouth agape, in a sacrament of pause. Spools of thread glittered softly like a city from an airplane. On the other side of Main, the pawn shop hung guitars against red felt, silent wood and wire under a dusting of Sunday light. Amplifiers that could rattle rib cages on Friday stood as tame as lambs. A trumpet caught the sun and threw a small gold lake onto the floorboards. Florists pushed their day to Saturday and then exhaled. On Sunday, the cold case breathed quietly, tulips closed like hands at prayer, roses learning to loosen their fists petal by petal. A note on the door gave a number for emergencies, weddings and funerals never fully on a calendars, and a bucket of leftover greenery sat outside for anyone who wanted to take some home. You could smell damp stems and the green, peppery ghost of carnations through the glass, a scent that can make you remember both beginnings and endings without specifying which. Delivery trucks were notable by their absence. No reverse beeps, no side doors rattling open like cymbals, no cardboard sighing onto dollies. The loading bay behind the big store became a cul-de-sac for crows. A cat, freed from the calculus of dodging, stretched in a sunstripe as if it had invented leisure. Parking meters, normally stern little heads on silver necks, looked less judgmental. A row of empty diagonal spaces made each angle seem like a page in a book you meant to read slowly. Even the municipal bones of the place participated. The post office's brass boxes gleamed with locked restraint. The courthouse steps, usually carrying a flow of arguments in shoe leather, hosted nothing but pigeons and sunlight and a child hopping from shadow to shadow. The library, if it was open at all, opened late. If it wasn't, its windows held shelves like promises, thick spines lined in chorus, knowledge agreeing to wait another day. The firehouse doors stood upright and glossy. Nobody wished for their sudden noise. In some towns, the streetcars clanged less often. In others, the buses arrived with a Sunday schedule that taught patience to anyone not in a hurry. So almost everyone. The driver tilted his cap back and said afternoon, like an old word he was glad to remember. Traffic lights blinked yellow down an avenue that on weekdays roared like a river. Now they made a metronome for the handful of cars that strolled through. Crosswalk signals raised their white hands to a congregation of no one, and then relaxed again, faithful without a crowd. Restaurants that did open after church opened like a curtain on a smaller stage. Tablecloths wore their best corners. Silverware lined up at attention. The clatter stayed dignified, a soundscape of plates and low conversation that never had to compete with music turned up to erase other people's lives. The chalkboard menu smiled in big loops of cursive pot roast biscuits, green beans cooked long, pie of the day with a slice that dared anyone to call it restrained. Along the edges of Main Street, porches and stoops leaned into the vacancy. With stores asleep, the living rooms of the town moved outdoors. People brought out rockers, then brought out their stories. A checkerboard appeared on a crate. Lemonade took the shape of its glass and held it proudly. Dogs performed the ancient theatre of barking at nothing. Between houses, the human scale of life, the one measured in glances and nods and borrowed sugar, stepped into the space where commerce had politely left a gap. Time itself seemed to tint differently. Morning slid toward afternoon across a face without numbers, just a feeling that the sun had shifted on the floorboards inside the bakery, that the shadow of the stop sign had crawled to a new crack in the sidewalk. The town, unchased by errands, became legible as a map of memories. You could point. That's where I bought fountain pens in rows like soldiers. That's where they cut keys and the wall sounded like rain. That's where I found a winter hat in July, because the clerk remembered the back room. In the pause of Sunday, the list became a story. The textures of things introduced themselves. The grain in the butcher block counter at the deli looked like a river delta. The velvet in the jewellery store's trays made a small storm under the slanted light. The old linoleum in the department store wore constellations of scuffs that, if you squinted, drew the map of a state you'd like to visit. The brick facades patiently holding up signs and awnings showed their freckles. Even the new places, glass and steel and optimism, learned to behave, their reflections gentled by the emptier street. Where the sidewalk met the door, little details added up to a mood. A rubber wedge, used all week to prop the bakery door open for the scent to escape, rested like a dozing beetle. A come in sign flipped to closed, showed a ghost image of itself on the glass, as if the day respected both possibilities at once. A bucket with a mop leaned in the back hallway of the pizza parlour, handle crossed with the broom like two tired friends. On a windowsill inside the bookstore, a cat settled into a spiral that implied the day would remain round and unbroken. It wasn't abandonment. It was stewardship. Owners had tidied before they left. Till drawers counted and locked, thermostats set a last glance across a room that had given its best as if it were a person. The sleeping town didn't feel neglected, it felt trusted. The machines were silent because people had decided not to ask anything of them for a while. The rest wasn't an accident. It was a craft learned over years, a community art form with its own tools, signs, schedules, shared expectations, courtesy. And when someone did need something, the need had room to show its face. The pharmacist's backlight, the single pump at the old gas station that handled emergencies, the bell on the side door of the bakery that you could ring if you absolutely had to, makeshift stitches in the fabric that let the cloth hold without tearing. Main Street on Sunday offered the paradox: a healthy town can teach. A place can be most itself when it is least busy, and a street can tell the truth about who lives along it when the cash drawer is closed and the windows are left to speak for everyone. Sunday doesn't go silent. It lowers its voice, so everything else can be heard. The day begins almost imperceptibly, with softest percussion, a window blind tapping once against its frame, the light tick of a cooling radiator, the whispery scroll of a newspaper sliding across a doormat. A kettle starts its small crescendo, thin at first, then a modest whistle that never needs to compete. Bacon hisses in the pan like rain finding a warm stone. Somewhere a cupboard closes with the padded thump of a hand that knows how to keep peace. The house edits its own soundtrack, removing anything that might rush you. From outside comes the long vowl of a distant train, drawing a line through the morning and then letting it fade. The horn sounds different today, less schedule, more story, stretched across neighbourhoods like a ribbon of breath. Church bells answer in measured phrases, some bright and quick, some round and slow, the notes spacing out enough that each one lands. If you stand at the sink with your hands in the dishwater, the vibrations seem to arrive through your wrists as well as your ears, a reminder that sound is touch that learned to travel. Even the birds have their say in a new register. Sparrows embroider the hedge with chatter. A mourning dove drops its weightless woo-low call from a telephone wire. Crows negotiate in syllables that sound like they know every secret in town. A screen door opens and returns to its frame with a genteel spring. Cheeky on Saturday, considerate on Sunday. Steps descend a wooden porch in socks, not shoes. The boards voice their opinion one by one, satisfied to be useful without being dramatic. On city blocks, the quiet reveals machinery you don't notice on weekdays. The traffic signal clicks through its cycle with the politeness of a metronome. An elevator sighs and rests. Steam hisses from a vent like a sleeping dragon that agreed to keep the dream going. In older buildings, plumbing speaks in bass notes, while someone 2 floors up runs bathwater at a lazy pace. A bus kneels, doors open with a soft gasp, and then the air closes around the absence of hurry. You can hear the space between footsteps in the stairwell, heel, pause, toe, like punctuation for a calm paragraph. In small towns, the acoustic map is a mile wide. A flag's halyard taps the metal pole, ting, ting, counting time in a language no clock learns. Somewhere down the block, a porch swing tells its tiny ghost story. The chain creaks, the slats give a satisfied sigh, then a quiet return. The neighbour's dog collars add a polite jingle as two dogs discover the science of shared sunlight. A rake pulled once across the lawn shushes the grass. Then the rake is leaned against a fence with a sound like a sentence ending early on purpose. At late morning, voices enter the mix, but they arrive like instruments added to a chamber group. Never an orchestra, never a parade. A preacher's microphone hum in a clapboard church, followed by the slow lift of a hymn. The organ swells but leaves air for breath between lines, and the congregation's consonants knit the room together. In a brick parish, the choir floats a Gloria that hangs in the rafters like a coloured scarf. Across town, a black church rocks a call and response that sets the floorboards thrumming. Tambourine bright as a sunlit river, the drum answering in the language of heartbeat. At a storefront congregation, a guitar strums, the amp set just low enough to hear the fingertips on strings. And in houses without services, silverware makes its own liturgy. Spoon against mug, butter, knife whispering across toast, plates touching down like planes on a friendly runway. The radio belongs to Sunday the way a porch belongs to a house. An old AM broadcast unspools a ball game in a voice timed to keep nerves asleep. Top of the third, one on, one out, and the crowd's murmur is an ocean that never storms. No one cranks the volume. The game is there to tint the afternoon, not to own it. Play-by-play becomes a grammar for rest. The long silence between pitches lets the room hear itself breathing. When the crack of the bat finally comes, it's a clean wooden truth that needs only a single cheer to finish its sentence. In another room, a jazz record turns slow circles, the needle landing with a kindness that feels like wiping your feet before entering. Brushes on a snare whisper. A bass walks without raising dust. A trumpet chooses restraint and finds eloquence. At midday, kitchens are percussion and choir in one. The oven door lowers with a padded exhale. A roast gives its occasional polite sigh. A pot lid does that little dance where the steam says "let me out" and the lid says "we'll see." Someone tests a sauce and the teaspoon rings against the pot, bright and brief. Ice knocks in a glass, then settles. A child's book flutters the hesiwl as it is closed, and the page edge makes a secretive breeze. In the dining room, chairs scoot carefully so the floor keeps its dignity. When laughter comes, it peeks under the ceiling and returns, softening as it goes, like a ball rolling back across carpet into a waiting hand. Outside again, the street performs an experiment in echo. Your shoes make crisp punctuation on concrete, and the sound carries farther than you expect because nothing interrupts. A cyclist passes, freewheel ticking in a line that ties one end of the block to the other. From a garage somewhere, the well-oiled click of a fishing reel, someone is daydreaming at a workbench, and the day is happy to be reeled in slowly. Basketball in a driveway announces itself as a sequence of solitary truths. Rubber, backboard, rim, the friendly clatter of a net. The ball dribbles 3 times, stops. Silence gets the last word, then returns it. In apartments, the acoustics are neighbourly. Piano scales drift through a wall, each note spaced wide enough you can hear the practice in it, not the performance. A vacuum hesitates at the threshold of a bedroom and thinks better of it. The couple upstairs laughs exactly once, and then talks low, like pedestrians passing a sleeping baby. A blender comes to life for a minute and then gives up the stage to birdsong. Someone uses a hammer, 3 gentle taps as if happy to be wrong about urgency, then silence, then one decisive knock. There it is, followed by a contented absence. Near water, Sunday takes on tidal speech, and a lake hushes against its stones with open palms. On a river, oars dip and rise with little arithmetic sighs, subtract, add, subtract. A buoy out in the bay sounds its bell. Metal speaking weather. A foghorn far away writes a sentence that ends in a long forgiving comma. Docklines creak once and settle. The gulls argue lazily without filing a single complaint that needs to be solved today. In the countryside, insects inherit the afternoon. Crickets start before they're due, running their combs along the edge of heat until the whole meadow feels stitched together. A bee toggles complaints and compliments inside a hollyhock. The wind edits the tall grass with the world's gentlest scissors. Somewhere in the distance, a tractor coughs to life and then thinks better of it. The cough becomes a memory. The screen door on a farmhouse trades its familiar slap for a kind of negotiated truce. "I'll close," it says, but quietly. The built world keeps lending small, precise sounds that would be swallowed any other day. A book slid from a shelf sighs like a coat shrugged off. A pen clicks, then scratches a list made only to be ignored. The thermostat ticks once and forgets about it. A candle flame murmurs when someone passes, the wick recentering. Chess pieces make their careful clink. Dominoes knock like distant knuckles on wood. The zipper on a nap pillow finds its end with a victory whisper you can hear only when you're very close. Even the machines that insist on existing learn their manners. The washing machine, if it works at all on Sunday, keeps the spin low. A rumble like a cat sleeping with intention. A dishwasher purrs behind a closed kitchen door, water speaking fluent hush against plates that don't mind being clean. The garage door opens once all day, a slow roll of thunder that does not threaten rain. A lawnmower starts on one side of town, sputters, finds a rhythm, then stops. The silence after feels like the day putting a finger on its lips, and most other lawns agree to grow quietly. As afternoon leans toward evening, new instruments take their places. Wind chimes counter breeze in silver syllables. Ice cream trucks, if they appear, play their songs like a parent reading a book in a library, cheerful, restrained, ready to close the cover. Barbecue lids clink. Tongs tap the rail twice, an old superstition or just a cook's way of telling the grill what's next. A garden hose kinks, then unkinks with a hollow cough, and water turns the dust to dark, releasing the smell that makes children remember every summer at once without knowing why. The human voice is the leading instrument of the day, but it never solos to dominate. Greeting stretch. Afternoon. With F turned into a feather. The neighbour calls a child home with a name that ripples across yards, and the name arrives without scolding, only invitation. A phone rings in the other room, an old bell with a patient gap between tones, and the person who answers does not rush. The conversation turns into a hammock, not a rope. Laughter syrups its way off a porch and stops just shy of the sidewalk, unconcerned with being heard, content to remain local weather. Then comes the small exact theatre of evening. A book closes, cloth on the cloth. The lid goes back on the cookie tin with a tinny, satisfied kiss. A match scrapes and blooms. Somewhere else a switch performs its crisp promise and a lamp honours it. Crickets take the stage without warming up. A screen door re-enters the drama it began at dawn, this time with the slight, deliberate click of a lock turned not against the world but toward rest. From far off a last bell peals, one note this time, and rolls across roofs and trees until it becomes less a sound than a shape you can nearly see as it rounds the corner and continues on. The edge of the house becomes the centre of the world. Boards warmed by sun, paint softened by the years of summer hands, a step that knows every shoe by heart. This is where Sunday settles, not inside with the clocks, but outside where time chooses a chair and stays. The front porch is a little theatre with no curtain and no tickets, just the slow arrivals of neighbours and breezes and passing clouds. Rockers sway with old memory, wicker breathes under the weight of stories. A swing draws its easy cursive across the day, forward, back, a sentence that never needs a period. A pitcher on the rail sweats like it understands modesty. Condensation gathers, hesitates and jumps, leaving wet crescents on the wood where glasses have been. Lemon wedges sink and then rise again like divers who remember something that they want to say. The ice answers only when asked. A tray of cookies or cut fruit or nothing to tool sits as an offering to anyone who wanders up the steps. On the newel post, a tiny universe of paint chips records colours of other years. Eggshell, sage, earnest blue, like tree rings for houses. Screen doors make a sound that belongs to Sunday, a honeyed squeak, a near-silent slap, the faint thrum of the spring, remembering the week's tempo and refusing it. Bare feet learn the grain of the boards. A sleeping dog arranges itself in a patch of shade that moves like a slow tide. The leash hangs from a hook, unused, a tassel on the day. Somewhere under the porch a coolness lingers, the stored breath of last night's air, and when someone leans down to retrieve a dropped spoon or a runaway marble, they meet a small pocket of morning. The front porch is a lighthouse for people. A nod is a kind of light. A wave is a beacon that says, "Safe here." The same walkers arrive at the same hour without arranging it. Old Mr. Alvarez in his brim counting the cracks in the sidewalk like prayer beads. The twins from 2 doors down, chalk-dusted and serious, dragging a wagon filled with bottle caps, a doll with one shoe, a universe of purpose. Miss Geneva with her hatpin and her fan, sharing a laugh with the breeze and winning. The mail doesn't come, so the gossip goes by foot, unhurried, fact braided with kindness, rumour untangled and set gently aside. Porch talk has its own grammar. It begins in weather and returns there often. Not because there is nothing else to say, but because weather is the language everyone speaks without thinking. That cloud looks like it's got plans. Heat that sits, doesn't it? Smell of rain in the sycamores. Then the real matters sidle up, as comfortable as neighbours borrowing sugar. Heard your sister's back home. Pecan trees fruiting early. How's the knee? Advice arrives like shade. Offered, not draped. Jokes arrive like swallows, darting, precise, gone and then back again. The front porch can be velvet or denim. In the south, columns hold up a roof that holds up the sky. Ceiling boards wear that certain blue that turns wasps into gentlemen and teaches them manners. A swing as long as a nap arcs on the chains that talk in soft metal vowels. Ferns spill from baskets in a green that forgives everything. In Midwestern towns, the porch is a shoulder against winter remembered. Deep benches, stitched cushions, a braided rug to keep the day from slipping. Row house stoops on city blocks know the art of economy. 3 steps, a railing smooth as conversation, a chair that folds and unfolds like a point well made. Even a fire escape with its iron lace can become a Sunday porch. Coffee balanced on a step, basil in a pot, an elbow on a warm bar watching the street catch its breath. Backyards are the soft room behind the theatre, where the costume is spare feet and the script is optional. Grass knows the choreography of picnics without rehearsal. A blanket unrolls, plates settle, a fly negotiates and is persuaded to try his business elsewhere. The table under the maple remembers 1,000 elbows. Its planks show the history of barbecue sauce in finger-width commas. The grill clicks and takes a small breath. When the flame answers, it keeps its voice low. Smoke threads the air and finds every conversation, adding a little cedar to the syllables. Tongs make their quiet metronome, tap-tap on the rail. Part superstition, part music, mostly joy. Fences aren't borders so much as instruments. Chain link sings when a child runs a stick along it. A silver zipper sewing after lunch to before dusk. Wood fences offer shadow theatre, the dog's tail like a metronome, the neighbour's arm describing a story you can follow without hearing a word. Over the top, tomato vines lean with the weight of success. Cucumbers dangle like surprised ornaments. Sunflowers argue amiably with the blue. The compost bin whispers that nothing is wasted, that peels and stems become next season's first promise. A hose writes cursive on the lawn, the green darkening wherever the letters pass. Sprinklers declare small rain for the republic of backyard children, a republic where shrieks are permitted but somehow softened by the day's good manners. A beach ball conducts a silly orchestra against a fence and then rests. Shoes pile under the bench as if their owners have escaped polite society and joined a gentler tribe. The hammock accepts all politics and reports none. It tells the truth about weight and balance and teaches the body to trust a net. The small industry of the garden continues on Sunday but takes breaks without guilt. Someone kneels and pulls a weed like a magician producing a scarf. The trowel pauses mid-air because a goldfinch has arrived to perch on the fence. The basil leaves accept a haircut and give back perfume. Dirt gathers in the grooves of a palm. Later a sink will turn it into a river down the drain, but for now the hand is a map of work loved for its own sake. A pair of gloves hangs on a nail like two bats in daylight. A straw hat makes a circle of shade move across the yard like a clock learning to dance. Backyards are archives. A faded wiffle ball under the lilac holds the ghost of last summer's game. A chalk line at the edge of the patio reads stop in letters softened by rain and ignored by nobody. The tyre swing carries a history of knees and wheels, each squeak a testimony. A birdhouse has real estate problems, a sparrow subletting from last year's bluebirds. On the fence, a tiny plaque, someone's attempt at decor, says, "Gather," as if the yard needed a reminder. It doesn't. It obeys the sign naturally. Between front porch and backyard, the house becomes a kind of bridge the day walks across. From the street, a breeze crosses threshold and hall and arrives in the kitchen carrying the smell of cut grass. From the yard, laughter crosses the same route and lands on the front steps like a returning traveller. The screen door plays both sides, fluent in both dialects. Footsteps draw their maps, a run to the freezer for more ice, a stroll to the herb bed for a sprig of something green, a drift to the porch for a while because the world on the other side of the rail is telling a story about a crow and a shiny thing. Porches host games that understand the day's tempo. Checkers in the red and black democracy of quiet rivalry. A deck of cards thick with years, its corners rounded by victory and concession in equal measure. Dominoes, their white bones presenting equations the afternoon solves without hurrying. A jigsaw puzzle on a side table missing 3 sky pieces, not because they are lost, but because they have not yet chosen to be found. A crossword with pencil because permanence is for weekdays. Today is for trying things on. There is a choreography to sitting that only porches teach. Elders choose shade first, their chairs angle to catch both breeze and conversation. Younger bodies drape themselves across steps like cats, finding geometry where none was planned. A toddler climbs from lap to lap as if collecting stamps in a blue passport. Someone perches on the rail in violation of a rule everyone knows and nobody enforces on Sundays. When the neighbour wanders over with a bowl of peaches, all chairs make room as if they were hinged to kindness. Backyards have their own liturgy of repair and its postponement. The loose slat remains loose and does not threaten the republic. A hammer lies nearby, sun-warmed, patient as a friend who knows when not to offer help. A bike with a squeak leans against the shed. WD-40 appears, the chain quiets, and the rider returns to the democracy of cul-de-sacs. A kite, unflown, waits on the picnic table, its tail telling secrets to the breeze. Someone ties a new ribbon, not because wind insists, but because beauty is also a form of rest. Animals make their circuits like parishioners after the benediction. Squirrels execute elaborate feints along the fence as though serious matters are at stake. A rabbit disputes the border between lawn and lettuce with polite theft. A blue jay declares a government and enforces it with ceremony. The cat flicks the tip of its tail, making observations it will never share. Bees, oblivious to human calendars, move methodically from clover to clover as if taking attendance. Stoops, those compact porches of city life, become orchestras with fewer players and more soul. A radio set low in a window suggests Sam Cooke or Ella, the melody leaning into brick-like ivy. A neighbour on the next stoop shells peas into a bowl that has seen 1,000 Sundays, the peas thudding with the soft percussion of work done at a human pace. Down the block, a fire hydrant is not open, but a kid imagines it anyway, riding a busted scooter in figure eights, tyres whispering. A couple 2 floors up hangs a string of lights that will not be needed yet but looks like a promise kept early. The back alley on Sunday is gentler than its reputation. Lids lift and close with courtesy. The utility poles host a murmuration of starlings practicing their wheeling math. A basketball hoop with a wobbly rim accepts a bank shot with a sound like, "Yes, fine, you may have that one." A father teaches a child to ride without training wheels on the flattest stretch of gravel they can find. The child wobbles. The father jogs. The bicycle discovers the ancient physics of trust, and when it works, their whoop echoes off the garage doors and out into the wider yes of the day. Season changes write new lines for the porch without altering the play. In spring, pollen dusts the rail in yellow hieroglyphs. Someone draws a smiley face with a fingertip and leaves it there like a cheerful omen. In high summer, the fan on the ceiling stirs air into usable language, and the sound of ice becomes a metronome for the afternoon. In autumn, mums gather like small suns around the steps. The porch hosts a bowl of apples whose skins reflect the sky. Even winter has its Sundays. A quilt over knees, steam from a mug leaving brief messages that fade before they are read. The backyard, a white page where birds write with their feet and erase nothing. The house has antennae for contentment, porch flags that ruffle at exactly the speed of relief, windsocks that demonstrate invisible kindness, chimes that never overstate their case. Back there on a trellis, morning glories test 1 new bloom, and then, approved by the day, open 3 more. On the corner of the patio, somebody has kept a notebook for years. What planted, what took, what didn't, but taught something anyway. The handwriting changes as the children grow. The mistakes remain charming and instructive. The dates prove that Sundays outlast moods. Conversations beneath a maple learn to abide silence. A story reaches its period and no one rushes to replace it with another. Leaves edit the light into coins and hand them out freely. Time stretches not like taffy, sticky and slow, but like linen, a clean, soft length you can fold and refold. The porch clock, if it exists, is always 5 minutes for giving. The yard's only calendar is the angle of shadow from the chimney to the bird bath. Toward afternoon's long bend, someone brings out a book and reads 3 pages, then puts it down because the neighbour's grandson has arrived with a joke to test on an adult audience. It works, because Sunday chooses to be generous to beginnings. Another chair appears as if grown. The grill lid opens for the last time, the coals giving a final red thought before surrender. Plates clink with the democratic delight of potluck. Corn in a big bowl, sliced tomatoes shining like medals, bread with butter knifed on without the argument of dieting. If the front porch is the face the home shows the world, the backyard is its unguarded laugh. You could walk the length of a block and see a dozen versions of sanctuary. A string of lights and a cheap rug turning concrete into a living room. A garden that grew from one stubborn tomato plant into a republic of green. A single chair facing a single tree. A picnic table tattooed with initials and knife-scratched hearts. The wood seasoned with spills that turned into gloss. None of it competes. Each yard, each porch conducts its small orchestra in the same key, and the neighbourhood, taken together, becomes a long, slow song you can hum, even after you've gone inside to rinse the glasses. even after you've turned the chimes quiet with a finger, even when the screen door closes behind you with a sound you could recognize in the dark. The day starts measuring itself in aromas. Before clocks matter, there's the low certainty of something roasting, a fragrance that crawls up the stairs and drifts under doors, persuasive as a story you've heard before and still want to hear again. A pan warms on the stovetop, fat wakes, shimmers, and begins its soft conversation with onions. Celery follows, then carrots, and the room fills with the sound of a polite sizzle. Busy but not hurried, like rain agreeing to stay a while. Someone opens a spice cabinet and the whole week tilts toward comfort. Pepper cracked like distant gravel. Thyme rubbed to release its green memory. A bay leaf laid down like a quiet promise. You won't remove until everything else is ready. The table begins to become itself. A cloth comes out that never sees Wednesday. Linen with a stubborn crease, a cotton print that knows the names of past stains and forgives them. Hands smooth the fabric, palms travelling the same routes ancestors pressed, checking for crumbs, pride, any wrinkle that might trip a plate. Mismatched napkins, checked, floral, plaino, fold into shapes casually precise. Plates that live behind glass the rest of the week line up and nod at one another. The good forks go left, the spoons right, and there's always one more than you think you'll need, because someone might knock and be pulled inside with, "We've got plenty." The oven becomes a second sun. A roast hums at low heat, shyly giving up its juices to a bed of onions. Potatoes wait their turn, some destined for mash, peeled into a pale drift, boiled until they surrender, then beaten with butter and milk to a softness that stands up and holds a wave. Others cut into wedges, tossed with oil and a conspiracy of rosemary, and roasted until their edges learn the language of crisp. A pan of green beans pops as if rehearsing for applause. Yeast rolls rise under a towel like hills, then take on colour you cannot name without also wanting to tear one open. Butter waits at room temperature, a patient square with a knife poised for kindness. Kitchen choreography requires no announcement. One person stirs and checks, another washes and returns, a third wanders through on the errand of taste this and stays. The radio murmurs a game from the next room, the announcer naming small heroics and long pauses between pitches so the gravy can thicken without jealous supervision. Someone cranks the pepper mill with ceremonious authority. Someone else dips a spoon into pan drippings and makes a face of concentration that means more salt. And exactly 2 shakes later it is right. A child is handed a job that matters. Snap beans, set knives, fold napkins, and their shoulders lift a little with the weight of belonging. Gratitude slips between tasks as easily as steam. A pie cools by the window and the crust ticks as it settles, tiny fissures making a map of patience. If it's apple, the cinnamon lives in the air like a hymn. If it's pecan, the top glints like a pond at noon. If it's lemon meringue, the peaks brown into geography. If it's sweet potato, the spice is a memory of holidays without the pressure to perform. Sometimes the pie is a cake instead, a sheet cake with frosting that takes fork tracks like snow. Sometimes it's simply a bowl of sliced peaches, macerating with sugar and a stubborn splash of vanilla, because summer already did the work. The menu keeps a family tree. In a southern kitchen, cast iron declares jurisdiction. Fried chicken arrives in rounds, hot, hotter, gone, while collards nap in pot liquor, heavy with smoked meat and luck. Cornbread bakes in a skillet that's older than the mortgage. Its crust knows secrets. Macaroni and cheese breathes under a blanket of cheddar, old enough to have an opinion. On the table, a bottle of hot sauce takes its place like a small red gavel. In an Italian-American home, red sauce rules the clock. A pot bubbles with meatballs that were rolled in conversation and discipline. sausages simmering beside them. The house smells like Sunday, not as a day, but as a country. A platter of sliced mozzarella and tomatoes glows under basil leaves like little flags. Grated Parmigiano falls like first snow onto everything that welcomes it. In a Mexican-American kitchen, a pot of pozole carries hominy like pearls. The broth wears its chile with pride. Oregano waits in a small dish to be crushed between fingers just before serving. A pan of rice freckles itself with carrot coins and peas, and lime wedges gather like bright commas for sentences that need them. In a black household after church, the spread is testimony. Candied yams, shining green beans long cooked with smoked turkey, cornbread, dressing convincing you all over again that a pan can hold joy. In a Midwestern home, the word casserole arrives with its own fanfare. Tuna under potato chips, chicken under crumbled crackers, green beans under proud fried onions, and nobody apologizes because nobody needs to. In a Jewish home where Sabbath ended the night before, Sunday borrows from tradition. Leftover challah becomes French toast for late breakfast. Chicken soup, golden as late afternoon, is amended and brought back to steam. A brisket that rested overnight finds its perfect slice. A Filipino table brings pancit that tangles stories, lumpia lined like little trumpets. Adobo that has agreed with vinegar on the terms of tenderness. A Vietnamese sundae might perfume the house with star anise from a stock that has considered bones for hours. Herbs wait in a bouquet, ready to turn bowls into gardens. There are as many Sundays as there are kitchens, and each uses salt differently, but understands what it's for. Setting the table is its own liturgy. Someone counts chairs out loud, a spell against forgetting. One for Nana, one for Uncle Joe, one for the neighbour whose car isn't in the driveway, but always shows up when the biscuits do. A high chair squeaks into position like a clarinet clearing its throat. Place cards are unnecessary, but sometimes appear anyway, written in a cousin's bubble letters, because this is how you practice the art of hosting, when your feet still dangle. The pitcher of sweet tea beads up and turns the coaster into a small lake. Water glasses stand at attention, ice cubes chiming like distant silverware. A jug of lemonade, fresh squeezed if someone felt ambitious, concentrate if the day demanded mercy, catches the sun and makes it drinkable. The door opens in a rhythm the house recognizes. Coats stack themselves without adult supervision. Voices braid in the entryway as if they had rehearsed. Hugs are negotiated with hot pans, the choreography light-footed and sure. The person who always arrives late, bringing a bowl covered in foil and forgiveness. The person who says they're not hungry is handed a plate and then proves themselves a liar in the best way. There's a grace said or there isn't, but either way gratitude gets spoken, by words, by the way someone passes the rolls before taking one, by the way the biggest piece of chicken migrates to the plate of the person who said they didn't care. The first minutes at the table are a coastline where appetite meets attention. Bowls begin circulating in counterclockwise consensus because someone long ago decided it felt right. Serving spoons clink in dialects. Ceramic against ceramic, metal against enamel, wood against everything like a peacemaker. Take more becomes the day's second gospel. Who needs meets a chorus of I do. Butter passes and leaves a crescent moon wherever it goes. Salt travels and returns, wiser. A jar of pickles appears like comic relief. The gravy boat sails without incident most of the time, and when it doesn't, nobody drowns. A napkin can save a life. Conversation grows ribs and relaxes into itself. News of the week gets laid down like coats on the bed in the next room. A teacher describes a student who loved the planets unit and built Saturn's rings out of yarn. A nurse says the overnight was quiet and means it like a prayer. A mechanic explains a stubborn noise a car made and how it stopped when shown the right kind of patience. A grandparent tells a story heard before but still fresh. Details altered by the pleasure of telling. How a certain pie used to cost 15 cents. How a bus once broke down in August and a stranger handed over a paper fan. Between sentences, There is chewing, which is the oldest punctuation, and there are small, unshowy silences, which are also part of what's being said. Children have their own weather. Someone drinks milk too fast and coughs. Someone else draws a face in mashed potatoes with a discreet carrot smile before the artistry is eaten. A toddler drops a spoon and discovers gravity anew. 3 hands reach to return it. The floor forgives. Teenagers describe a teacher's impossible haircut, a game that went wrong and then went right, a joke that cannot be told fully in front of elders but gets told anyway with the corners sanded off. Phones are present or they're not. If they are, they sleep in a stack by the bread, as if devices too deserve a nap. The middle of the meal is when the table shows what it can hold. From nowhere a memory arrives, someone who used to sit in the chair by the window and always asked for the end piece. The room shifts lightly to make space. The memory doesn't require a speech, it wants only the nods and the small sound people make when they agree to carry a thing together. Another bowl comes around. Beans this time, or roasted carrots glossed with honey. And grief moves over to let sensation through. Someone laughs in a way that forgives the past for not knowing this present could exist. Refills are unceremonious and perfect. The ice tinkles, tea darkens, lemonade reasserts its brightness. If there's wine, it is the informal kind. The bottle that was on sale, the cork recovered with a benign stubbornness, and laid on the table like a pod of a good idea. If there's beer, it sighs and participates. If there's only water, it tastes like everything right about ordinary life. Bread returns as if by homing instinct, and butter, having done enough, softens at the edge of its dish like a retired champion. Second helpings teach generosity and restraint in equal measure. The pan of macaroni has 2 corners left. One is mostly crust, one is middle, and someone asks which you prefer not to show off but to make sure no one goes without their favourite geometry. The last roll becomes a referendum on manners. It should go to the shyest person, so the table performs that little magic trick where it accidentally lands in the right hands. The salad bowl lingers because lettuce suffers from timing, but even that last leaf gets claimed by someone who believes in balance. A slice of tomato, abandoned on a small plate, is rescued and placed atop something that didn't ask for it, and improved anyway. For a moment the room goes quiet, not from a lack of things to say, but because every bite demands attention. That's when you notice the small things, the way sunlight has moved across the tablecloth and brightened the fork tines so they look like little mirrors, the way a child's knee jiggles in perfect time with nothing at all, the way steam invisible now still makes the air feel like a soft hand on the cheek. The house breathes around you. Refrigerator hum, a branch tapping the window, the tick of a thermostat deciding everyone is warm enough. Dessert enters not as a course but as an inevitability. Plates are cleared with the sound of minor industry, stack, scrape, thank you, and in the window the pie glows. The first cut is a geometry lesson that every family solves differently. Some slices big like permission, some narrow like prudence, all of them correct. Coffee reappears, not the morning kind that slaps you awake, but the afternoon kind that nods and says, "Let's linger." In some houses, cups and saucers emerge from hiding. In others, mugs make a democratic clatter. A can of whipped cream protests cheerfully. A pint of ice cream gives up its dignity with a scoop that carves the day into a new shape. If there's cobbler, the spoon breaks through the brown top with a sound like cracking good news. If there's a tray of cookies, hands hover and joke about just one, a promise unfit for such generosity and therefore broken on purpose. After sweetness, the table loosens but does not dissolve. Someone leans back and says the line that belongs to every Sunday in America, "I couldn't eat another bite," and then does. A story that needs 2 hands to tell gets told. Furniture creaks in agreement. Plans for the evening are suggested and then allowed to float. A walk, a nap, a game, a drive to the river just to see what the water thinks of the light. The oldest person at the table corners the youngest into a conversation about school that turns into a lesson on how to shuffle cards. The middle generation watches with the particular relief of people who are not required to be brilliant at this hour, only present. In the kitchen, a second life begins. Dishes stack into small skylines beside the sink. The dishwasher door lowers like a drawbridge. Plates file in, forks clatter into their caddy like coins into a jar. Someone insists on washing as payment for being fed and is told to sit down twice before being allowed to help. Tupperware lids negotiate with their bottoms, a puzzle that tests memory and patience, until each portion finds a home for Monday. Leftovers carry spells, a slice of pie that will taste like permission after the kids are in bed, an extra piece of chicken that restores faith in Tuesdays, a jar of gravy that promises to keep the roast story going on toast. The fridge opens its bright mouth and agrees to adopt it all. The tablecloth shows the history of the meal in light stains and crumbs, a topography of joy that a damp cloth will convert into the cleaner memory of having happened. A child is deputized to shake the cloth over the grass. Crumbs fall like confetti. Birds revise their afternoon plans. Chair legs squeak as they return to their weekday alignments. Salt and pepper reunite in their corner. The butter receives its small roof of waxed paper. The bread goes back to the bread box with a sense of accomplishment. People drift into smaller orbits. Two linger at the sink for the kind of conversation that can only happen with sleeves rolled and hands in warm water. Three gather by the window to identify birds as if they've always known how. Someone falls asleep on the couch in the next room with a book tented on their chest, the spine making a little mountain over a heart that had a good day. A teenager sneaks one last cookie and doesn't have to sneak. A grandparent pockets an extra roll wrapped in a napkin with a glance that says, "I've been taught to carry blessings. The house cools from meal heat to people heat." A window lifts an inch and the world leans in to smell what was made. On the porch, the air tastes faintly of rosemary and sugar. In the backyard, plates abandoned on a picnic table collect light. An aunt remembers she left the pie server outside and returns with it, holding it like a trophy. The dog makes a full circuit under the table and gathers data it considers important. Somewhere a timer, forgotten, beeps once and is silenced with a laugh. What remains after the big Sunday dinner is not only fullness but calibration. The week waiting out in the driveway like a patient car seems less insistent when the sink is full of clean plates stacked to dry. The table, now bare except for a bowl of fruit and a salt shaker, looks like a promise that this could happen again, which is also a promise that everything in between can be endured. A recipe card gets tucked back into a box with a flourish. A new note is penciled in the margin. More time, less sugar. Double gravy next time. The running collaboration of generations. And in the hum that follows, the steady small sounds of a home on purpose, you can still catch a last warm thread of cinnamon, garlic, coffee, cornmeal, basil, butter and laughter, braiding themselves into the kind of memory that doesn't argue, doesn't boast, and doesn't need to be posted anywhere to be true. The mind loosens its tie without being told. There's nothing on the calendar that can't be moved with a fingertip, and so the entire house inhales. You find yourself doing things at human speed, tying a shoe like you mean it, rinsing a cup and watching the last bead of water hesitate on the rim, standing at a window long enough to learn the names of 3 new clouds you'll never be asked to remember. Work is not a villain today. It's simply absent, like a neighbour who took a train somewhere and waved from the platform. Without its constant tapping, a different metronome sets the pace. Breath, steps, the slow drip of a faucet that never seemed friendly until now. The to-do list sits where you left it and looks small, the way a jacket looks smaller when you see it on a chair instead of on a person. You don't crumple it or burn it in a garden ritual. You just let it live through a day without power. The list feels it too. The sharp edges soften, the verbs grow less bossy. Fix, call and file, learn conditional tenses. They become when it's time, if needed, later. A pencil lays across the paper gum, like a truce flag. You'll still tighten that loose knob, but not as penance, more like a favour you do for the door. The absence of hurry reveals work's shadow, worry. They keep each other fed during the week. One moves your hands, the other moves your mind. Both get tired, both pretend not to. Sunday teaches them to sit. You notice worry's tricks because you're not hypnotised by motion. It tries to draft you with invented emergencies, with imaginary critics waiting to review your porch sitting. But the day holds its palm up. Not today, it says, and for once you obey without the argument you prepared. It turns out some anxieties are powered by the same electricity as fluorescent office lights. Flip the switch, and then they go dark with a faint, embarrassed hum. The office is a ghost ship, whether it's a skyscraper or a small room over a hardware store. Elevators nap. Keyboards are just plastic again. Desks remember they are wood. In the corner, the plant, rescued from reception after a holiday party, does not miss you. It loves the stillness and the full Sunday sun on its leaves. The few places that must be busy, hospitals, firehouses, carry a different kind of alertness, not the frantic pulse of deadlines, but the sober readiness of people who serve. Their work humbles the category. It reminds the rest of the town that rest is not abandonment. It is the margin that keeps duty legible. Hands, which spend 6 days being tools, become instruments. They hold a book and feel its weight like intention. They mend a small tear in a shirt with 10 calm stitches that look like the tidy handwriting of a person who likes you. They butter toast in a way that could be called reverent if butter were a religion. They shell peas into a bowl. The soft thud of each green moon a kind of proof that small efforts count. And then they rest palms up on a porch armrest, ready to receive weather as if weather were a letter from an old friend. Even chores lower their voices. The broom doesn't scratch the floor like a warning. It whispers, "There you go." The laundry machine sounds like a distant ferry. You fold towels with missionary confidence, converting chaos to order in 5 minutes and then declining to continue the sermon. The lawn can wait because grass knows how to be tall without becoming a scandal. A sink full of dishes is just a small lake catching light. If you wash them now, good. If you wash them later, good. The day puts its arm around your shoulder and says, choose either, and for once you believe there isn't a trap. Money relaxes its grip. The stores are asleep or yawning on purpose, and there is a gentle ban on acquiring. You discover you already own the exact cup you need for this hour. A shirt you'd forgotten becomes new on your back because the day is new around it. The habit of scrolling through possibilities meets an emptiness that is not lack but spaciousness. The want machine idles, and in the quiet a different appetite emerges, for cool water, for shade, for a conversation with someone who remembers you from before you had a business card. Time, freed from piecework, returns as whole cloth. Instead of hierarchies, urgent, important, trivial, there are textures. Morning is cotton, afternoon is linen, evening is wool. You move through each without changing costumes, only pace. With no need to stack blocks of productivity, the hours drape. People who love you can read your silhouette in them. And when something does need doing, cutting fruit, bringing in the mail you forgot arrived yesterday, writing a thank you note, the doing feels proportional, not performative. You're not auditioning for your life, you are in it. There's a particular quiet that arrives at the back of the mind for where worry keeps its bunk bed. The top bunk is for catastrophes. It stays empty. The bottom bunk is for rehearsals. Today the actor sleeps. Without the double occupancy of dread and rehearsal, attention wanders into rooms it rarely visits. You notice the hairline crack in the wall and decide it looks like a river on a map. You realise the clock in the kitchen is 2 minutes fast and you do not correct it. You let it keep its small illusion of being urgent and let yourself keep yours of being on time. The tyranny of exactitude gives way to the grace of approximate. Letters are written today, not emails trimmed to the bone with a sharpened subject line, but real sentences that begin with hello and wander across the page like a good dog. You tell someone a story whose only job is to be kind. Stamps become small blue doors. Envelopes sigh shut with satisfaction. Even if you don't write, you think in paragraphs instead of bullet points. Inside the mind, italics replace exclamation marks, and the word enough appears without needing to be proved. Doing nothing becomes an art with technique. It isn't a collapse, it's a posture. You sit on a step with your elbows on your knees and practice seeing without inventorying. A fly does a complicated wobble past your ear and you let it. The sun warms the railing and your hand learns it. 10 minutes pass like a bird across the yard. The urge to document rises and falls without being obeyed. You're not a witness for anyone but yourself, and even you don't need evidence. The proof is in the quiet muscle of your jaw unclenching, in the way your shoulders remember their original width. On the radio, a preacher makes a point that is not for you, and somehow is, or a ball game inscribes its slow arc across the afternoon, each pitch a permission slip. Wait. Now swing. A book yields one perfect sentence and you close it, not because you're done, but because you want to walk around with that sentence in your pocket like a small smooth stone. A nap approaches like weather. You don't announce it. You just recline into a shape the body invented millennia ago and lease again every 7th day. Families discover they are not projects. The child who is always being improved is simply a human drawing a giraffe, where the neck goes on too long and the legs are adorable. The teenager who lives in the republic of closed doors appears, sits on the porch step nearest the conversation, and learns something without admitting it. Partners set down their tool belts, the literal one and the metaphorical one, and talk in the wide lane between logistics and confession. The old story about Aunt Thelma and the suitcase resurfaces. No one quotes a statistic, everyone laughs. Work's absence reveals its excess. You see how many of the week's tasks are redundant. How many memos could be postcards, how many meetings are weather reports with worse graphics. Sunday's gift is not only rest, but clarity. You can distinguish between the job and the unnecessary scaffolding around it. You vow nothing dramatic. You just file the information under Ways to be Kinder on Monday and trust the file will be there in the morning. There is a kindness that spreads outward like heat from a stone. You give the driver merging into your lane an extra car length and they wave. The wave works on you longer than it should, and that is precisely the point. The clerk at the one open store, a place that sells aspirin and birthday candles and humility, moves slower and is not punished for it. You match their pace. A neighbour's chore creeps into your yard, a branch, a wind-blown trash can lid, and instead of muttering, you carry it back with the gravitas of a ceremonial gift. You aren't better than you were yesterday. You're less taxed, and that looks like virtue from a distance. If there's worry left, it shrinks to fit the day's pockets. Big problems can't be solved by drumming fingers on a table, and small ones didn't deserve the drum solo they were getting. Sunday teaches triage without calling it that. It proposes a model. Not everything urgent is important, not everything important is urgent, and some things are neither and can be stared at until they turn into unremarkable air. The mind keeps trying to sneak back into the factory. The day keeps walking it out to the parking lot and pointing at the sky. People let themselves be amateurs. A sketchbook opens to a page that never asked for a masterpiece and gets a leaf that looks more like a hand and is perfect. A harmonica appears from a drawer and manages 3 tender notes that please the porch beyond expectation. Bread is attempted. If it fails, it becomes croutons. a failure that improves soup. Someone whittles. Someone writes a poem about a lawn chair that no one will read, and that's fine. The profit motive goes to bed early, play stays up. Walking becomes a spiritual practice with no vocabulary. You move through your own town as if it were a museum, curated by weather and choices made by other people. You pass fences that remember other hands. You nod to cats in windows who gaze like bored aristocrats. You pause at a construction site that rests, and you see future rooms as negative space. You discover a street you thought you knew is missing a house. In its place, clover. The world unharshens when you're not harvesting it for outcomes. As light tilts, the mind, so good at turning the future into threat, tries one last time. Tomorrow sharpens a tooth, but the day is seasoned. It carries a small toolkit, warm water on wrists, standing on the step and breathing air that has been through trees, writing 3 lines beginning with I am glad for and meaning at least 2. Worry, deprived of its favourite conditions, noise, speed, scarcity, dies from lack of oxygen. It will resurrect the way dandelions do, but you'll know how to hold a fork right next time. Even the body learns different arithmetic. Sleep begets energy instead of debt. Hunger answers to taste, not schedule. The ache in the shoulder, loud all week, is quieter because the jaw that feeds it has stopped biting invisible ropes. The spine, which too often impersonates a question mark, spends entire minutes remembering it is an exclamation point only when necessary, and a gentle line the rest of the time. Breaths are inventory taken by a compassionate auditor. Nothing grand announces itself. There is no banner, no horn section. The day asks less and gives more. By evening you have not vanquished dragons or optimized a thing. You have, almost accidentally, practiced being a person who belongs to their life. The undone remains, but it no longer leans on you like weather. The done consists of modest triumphs with long half-lives, a letter, a laugh, a loosened hinge, a recipe copied for a friend, a slice of time you can point to later when the week demands proof that you are not a machine and you have the receipt. It didn't happen all at once, the quiet frayed in little threads until you could pull a handful without meaning to, and then one day you noticed the whole edge of the week had unravelled. A sign that once said, closed Sunday, picked up a second line, open 12 to 5, and then the hyphen grew legs. Pharmacies that used to dim their aisles left the fluorescence up. Groceries pushed carts to the curb at 7 a.m, then 6. The bakery's bell learned the sound of a door on every day that ended in Y. Exceptions kindly made for necessity turned into habit. Habit turned into expectation. Expectation learned to advertise. Main Street's nap was replaced by the parking lot's appetite. Big box stores opened like indoor weather systems, and the lot began to fill in a slow, steady tide. Sedans nosing in next to minivans, a ballet of reversed lights and patience that grew thin at noon. Shopping carts beaded with condensation as people moved them from one climate zone to another. Chilly produce to hot asphalt to the cooled cave of a trunk. The Sunday circular, once a paper thing you shook open at the breakfast table, became an inbox swarm, a chorus of sale. Now that learn the precise hour your resolve lowered and nibbled there. Inside, the register's beep replaced the church bell's note as the public sound of a shared ritual. Leisure shifted costumes. Brunch discovered its own hustle. Waiting lists with names scribbled in the margins. Host stands negotiating the geometry of tables the way air traffic control negotiates runways. Bottomless mimosas mirrored bottomless scrolls. Both promised plenty. Both asked for time. Both could leave you curiously parched. The clatter and cheer were not wrong, just louder. And the day, once an amateur of hush, became a professional of plans. We'll meet at 11, then hit the market, then the outlet, then... And somewhere between then and then, the old unstructured hour slipped out the side door to smoke with ghosts. Sports learned to talk over everything. Kids' leagues moved from Saturday mornings to all-weekend travel, minivans left in darkness for fields 2 counties over, folding chairs rattling like flags, coolers packed with the provisions of a small nation. Tournaments colonized entire Sundays, bracket by bracket, the whistle's shriek taking the place of a nap. Parents wrote their names on the bottoms of casseroles and joined the migration, sunblock and schedules in hand, learning to be fans of the person they loved in a way that felt noble and frantic at the same time. Meanwhile, on screens larger than windows, professional Sunday turned into a liturgy of instant replays. Tailgates bloomed like steel flowers. Sports bars multiplied televisions until no corner offered escape. The ticker at the bottom of the picture crawled its news the way ants carry news. Endless, urgent, mostly about horror. Work didn't just creep into Sunday, it forwarded itself. The inbox coughed up quick thoughts, with subject lines that pinned the day to a corkboard. Decks wanted polishing, pre-reads wanted eyes, calendars wanted courage, as Slack and its cousins lit up with the Sunday night parade of green dots. Each one a firefly signalling, "I'm here," each one a small tax on a nervous system that still owed for last week. The phrase "tomorrow morning" shifted to include "tonight." The soft dread that once arrived like an evening fog learned new tricks, branding itself like a product, selling solutions, refusing to admit that much of it was air. Devices kept their own Sabbath once, off, face down, in a drawer. Then they learned to worship attention at all hours. Notifications turned the day into a series of tiny doors, each opening onto an advertisement, a headline, a favour, a weather warning, a joke. The glow that used to belong to lamps and late sunsets came from palms. Just checking something made a hammock out of minutes and then cut the ropes one by one. Even quiet rooms developed aquarium light. The aquarium stocked not with fish but with other people's lives. And the soundscape of Sunday added taps, swipes, a bright ping that made hearts hop like startled birds. Blue laws, once the architecture of hush, faded like paint on a barn. Court decisions and council votes, some reasonable, some impatient, redrew the town's posture. Car lots in certain places stayed still, in others streamers snapped in Sunday wind while salesmen learned a new script. Liquor shelves learned brunch hours and then learned loopholes. The list of works of necessity and charity fattened. Hospital, yes. Bakery, yes. Coffee, obviously. The pharmacy every hour, the warehouse always, the warehouse everywhere. If the law stopped asking a question, the market answered it anyway. Logistics discovered the seventh day the way rivers discover shortcuts. Warehouses became cathedrals of motion that never dimmed. Forklifts beeping in hymn, picking robots whispering skrrr across polished aisles. Delivery vans replaced the old milk truck. The new schedule promised by Sunday, and that promise needed engines and backs. Porch cameras recorded the exchange like a sacrament, package down, photo up, a little chime to complete the spell, while inside gratitude and guilt briefly shared a chair. The last mile discovered that miles don't respect calendars. The city learned to receive cardboard like weather all 7 days. Even the chores that used to bow to the hush learned to file for permits. Lawns demanded attention in neighbourhoods where rulebooks multiplied. Leaf blowers, drunk on their own physics, shouted a new psalm. In the alley behind the restaurant, a delivery's metal pallet jack clacked like castanets. A neighbour's circular saw began a deck at 3 p.m, and the day negotiated with it, saying, "We will let you build if you learn to sing a little softer." Some machines will never sing softer. The compromise became earplugs and politeness sharpened to a point. Churches didn't vanish, they had adjusted. Services multiplied to fit lives that had been sectioned like pies. 7:45, 9 o'clock, 10:30, live stream anytime, replay at convenience. Sanctuaries added projectors, fellowship halls added coffee bars, the hush learned to share real estate with LED. In some places the pews stayed wood and the hymns stayed slow, but even there the parking lot emptied on the dot, a timer inside each car already counting down to soccer warm-ups and outlet mall coupons expiring at 4. Faith bent without breaking. Culture broke without noticing. The marketplace moved into the living room and asked for a seat at the table. Meal kits with adjective knocked at the door. Streaming services rolled their new liturgies down the screen. Because you watched. Farmers' markets, lovely as quilts, taught Sundays to bustle with ethical consumption. Live music next to mushrooms, leashed dogs next to heirloom tomatoes, a scene beautiful enough to justify the churn. Antiques markets wrote price tags on nostalgia. Open houses installed cookies in kitchens that were not yet yours and asked you to imagine a life lived in rooms that smelled like vanilla staging spray. Airports became Sunday's undisputed capital. Security lines braided, monitors blinked late and on time, like lying and truth-telling jokes together, and rolling suitcases sang the new hymn of the return. Sunday night flights filled with students going back, salespeople with carry-ons confident enough to call themselves executive, grandparents with tote bags filled with good intentions. The departures board became a collage of elsewhere. The arrivals board said, "This is where the week starts now, at gate 14B. The week's boundary moved from a wall to a chalk line, then to a suggestion. Productivity culture sold Get Ahead Sunday like a gym membership. Meal prep, inbox zero, outfit layout, stack of books that looked suspiciously like obligations stacked flat. Self-help proposed Sunday systems until the day wore a little spreadsheet under its shirt. Even rest required a checklist, even pleasure, a quarterly plan. The mind, which had once learned to dilate on this day, learned to constrict to fit routines designed by people who thrive in fluorescent light. Houses adjusted their acoustics. The transformer hum of a laptop took up residence at the kitchen table. Printers that never made a sound all week coughed on Sunday to spit boarding passes and permission slips. Calendars bled from phones to whiteboards, colour-coded squares boxing out hope. The fridge collected magnets that held up schedules as dense as atlases. In the living room, chargers braided into a nest beside the couch, a modern hearth that heated nothing but the human need to touch elsewhere. Teenagers worked shifts to afford the week, host stand, coffee bar, fryer line, learning to smile at strangers while their own days slipped into the register tape. Parents traded the old nap for a new commute. Drop-offs to employments that don't include benefits, pick-ups from ones that do. Gig work asked the phone if it wanted to be a boss. The phone said yes. The person followed suit. Sunday wore the glow of an app's heat map. Red means money, red means now, red means the older math of rest will have to wait. Noise made its home in new places. Group texts blossomed the way lilacs used to. Bikes discovered speakers, walkers discovered podcasts that made silence feel wasteful. The sound of a neighbour's show leaked through a shared wall. Murders solved between ads for mattresses, and the old courtesy of lowering voices met the new habit of outsourcing them to devices. Even the library, a sanctuary of exhale, buzzed a little at the edges. Book drop, thumps, Sienna's chirps, a 3D printer knitting plastic into something that might be useful someday if we ever stop moving. Landscapes shifted too. Moles, once Sunday's cool caves, emptied in some towns and grew massive in others, but either way the architecture taught loitering with transactions attached. Food courts did brisk catechism in choice. Meanwhile, main streets tried to compete with the curated bustle. Art walks, pop-ups, live windows, and on the best days they won, but winning meant noise, and the old hush knew it had to yield a corner. The vintage shop put a turntable in the front room. The needle crackled to remind people that sound can be gentle, even when it's constant. Language learned new slogans. Sunday Funday smiled from shirts and glassware and felt like a permission slip that also needed to be framed. The calendar invented Sunday Reset, which sometimes meant peace, and sometimes meant chores pretending to be meditation. Self-care arrived with candles that smelled like trees that had never met a forest. The words weren't wrong, they were simply busy. Even our vocabulary put on shoes. Yet the unquieting was not only external, it grew inside. The nervous system, trained by pings and dings, anticipated them without help, like a dog that wakes before the alarm. The body sat but did not rest, the jaw clenched as if chewing news. Sleep on Sunday night became a referendum on how well you negotiated with Monday, and Monday lobbied shamelessly. The old Sabbath had asked for obedience to a rhythm. The new Sunday asked for performance of a mood. Relaxed, productive, available, fit, grateful, engaged. Instruments to be played simultaneously by amateurs with no conductor. Still, even a loud day carries pockets of hush if you listen for the seams. A delivery driver pauses under a jacaranda and watches the blossoms fall like purple rain on a street that forgot to schedule beauty. A cashier, between the beep and the bag, slides a look across the conveyor that says, "We're both people in here." A coach, at the end of a 4-game tournament, calls the team in close and speaks low, and the few as kids lean in because the body knows where truth is. A screen goes dark for a minute while a cloud crosses the sun, and for that minute the room belongs to air again. Somewhere a sign still says closed, and someone walks by and doesn't mind, and the part of the country that remembers how to be quiet lifts its head as if hearing its name called from another room, and begins haltingly to answer. You don't need a law to make a boundary. You can draw one with a pencil and keep it with your hands. Begin at the door. Hang a small sign inside where only you can see it. Closed for the ordinary miracle. It doesn't stop visitors or packages or neighbours with question. It stops the old habit of asking the day to do tricks. Right under it, place a basket, tin, bowl, anything with the edges, and give it a job. Keys here, wallets here, phones here. When they start to behave like bosses, the basket isn't punishment, it's a coat check. You'll get everything back when you leave, but while you're here, you don't need a name tag. Change the light. Lamps over overheads, windows over lamps, sky over all. Open one more curtain than you think you should. If it's winter, stand in the rectangle of sun like a plant and let the heat choose your shoulders. If it's summer, pull a sheet across the window to turn the room into linen. Light sets tempo. It says, today we read faces more than screens, steam more than news, pages more than metrics. Move the clocks a little farther away, not out of the house, just out of the centre. Keep one in the kitchen for pies and roasts and tea. Let the rest of the rooms run on feel. If you must wear time, wear it analog. Hands travelling across the numbers create a different weather than digits marching. A ticking clock tells the brain, this is a meadow, not a track. Set a table early even if you won't eat for hours. A cloth, some plates, a pitcher of water catching light. It makes a low promise to the day. Together will happen, even if together is only two or only you and the book waiting on the chair. If you live alone, put 2 glasses anyway and fill one with flowers or pencils or nothing. The empty place is not absence, it's space. Make a small list and call it not today. Put on it everything that thinks it owns you. Email, the other email, the urge to optimize. The voice that wants the baseboards immaculate as a resume. Give the list a gentle pat as you pass. You're not refusing responsibility, you're keeping it in shape. Work becomes stronger when it rests, so do you. Let breakfast take its time. Scramble eggs like you're late for nothing. Warm a tortilla directly on the burner and watch the bubbles rise like tiny worlds. Butter toast to the edges, because why would the middle get all the joy? Grind coffee and listen to the burrs like gravel smoothing a path. If you don't drink coffee, boil water and make it important anyway. Pour it over leaves that unfurl. Hold the cup with 2 hands so your body will remember you have 2 hands for holding. Put music on at a volume that respects conversation, even when there is no one to converse with, but your own daydream. Vinyl if you have it for the ritual, radio if you want company, A playlist if you must, but one that doesn't ask for skipping. Or choose the oldest track list, what the house makes when it's sure you're listening. Wood breathing, pipes thinking, a breeze negotiating the curtain, a page turning with a paper whisper that approves of your choices. Take a walk that accomplishes nothing. Leave the headphones. Let the neighbourhood tell you its small news, gardens auditioning, a porch flag discovering wind, chalk words on sidewalk preaching better sermons than most microphones. Name 5 smells. Count 3 blues. Learn the single different thing about a street you've walked 100 times. If you meet a dog, pretend you've been expecting them. Rearrange a little, but only a little. Move a chair to the window and discover the slant of light that belongs to 11 o'clock on this latitude. Put a plant on a stool and watch its leaves vote yes. Turn a pile of books horizontal and claim it was a design decision. Fold a blanket over an armrest as if the chair were an elder, and you are polite. Start a small pot that knows what day it is. Beans with onion, rice with bay, stock that will make later better. Let it go low while you do nothing that looks like cooking. Every so often lift the lid and stand in the cloud as if it were a weather you ordered. Add one thing that smells like a memory, cinnamon stick, rosemary sprig, orange peel, and then give thanks aloud to whoever taught you that trick, even if whoever is a stranger on a bus who once mentioned it. Make a corner for reading and banish your phone from the first reach of your arm. Stack 3 books, one that teaches, one that entertains, one that softens. A cookbook counts as all 3. So does a book of poems you think you don't understand. Poems are just instructions for breathing arranged vertically. If you share a house, pile a basket with picture books and let the youngest person distribute them. If you live with teenagers, leave comics where their hands land without asking for eye contact. If you live with elders, bring the big print library to the table and ask if they'll read you a page. They will. Practice the art of almost. Sweep almost to the corner and forgive the triangle. Weed almost to the fence and wave at the rest. Mend almost invisible and admire the honesty of the stitch. Sunday is good at teaching proportion, let it tutor you. If you must look at your devices, bargain for dignity. Turn off any notification that uses red on purpose. Red should belong to cardinals and ripe fruit. Schedule a single visit to the inbox and keep it shorter than tea. Draft what must be drafted and then give every message the dignity of send later. You're not required to donate your quiet to someone else's sense of urgency. Teach your tools your hours. Most will obey if you say please firmly. Invent a courtesy for your own mind. When worry knocks, give it paper. Write the thing down in one sentence. Then draw a box next to it and do not check it until tomorrow. Lists can be knotted ropes that pull you around the yard. They can also be leashes that keep worry from chewing the furniture. Choose the second. Invite the block to relax with you. Put a picture on the porch where a passerby could ask for water without having to ring. Chalk a hopscotch grid and leave a piece on the square one. Tack a note to the community board that says story chairs 4 to 5 and put 2 chairs under a tree. Sometimes you'll sit alone and watch light perform. Sometimes a neighbour will sit and tell you about their grandfather's pocket knife and the way it used to click. You don't need a committee to practice community. 2 people across a small table is a world government with a good constitution. Walk your town like a naturalist of quiet. Mark habitats. The bench by the library that gets a certain flap of shade. The path behind the ball field where clover smells freshly alphabetized. The cemetery whose paths understand walking without asking for conversation. Find a cafe that keeps the music below the steam wand and bring a paperback so the barista knows you intend to stay but not steal a table from the breakfast rush. Sit at the back of the museum on one of the upholstered benches and let a painting reset your posture. Stand in a grocery aisle you never visit and read labels like short stories. Bring back porch hour. Say it out loud so the house hears. Porch at 3. Put out glasses, a bowl of something to share, the good ice if there is such a thing in your home. Invite no one or invite the building. The ritual matters more than the attendance. If rain arrives, the porch becomes inside. If wind arrives, everyone leans. If heat arrives, you learn the economy of a fan. The point is gravity, the dependable pull toward a place the day recognizes as gentle. Revise sports, don't erase them. Ball games are fine, brackets are fine, travelling is fine when it's not a draft. But every calendar needs what coaches call recovery. Replace one tournament with a backyard shooting around, no scorekeeping, just the sound of the ball negotiating with rim and air. Replace one 90-minute practice with a 60-minute walk after dinner. The team in plain clothes, coach at the back, no drills except noticing. Score this, number of trees, different shapes of clouds, laughter unprompted. Call it conditioning, it is. Make one rule for the whole household and choose it together, not a heavy rule. An elegant one. No buying anything today except food. No saying should out loud. No lights after 10, candle hour. Phones upstairs, voices downstairs. No closing doors except the bathroom. Every question gets answered with a story. The point is not purity. The point is the feeling in the room when people share a boundary and it holds. Restore one chore to its ceremonial version. Shine shoes if you wear them. Iron a shirt with water that smells faintly of lavender. Polish a wooden spoon with oil and watch it become older and younger at once. Wind the clock. Sharpen the knife with slow, even strokes until it will cut a tomato out of respect rather than force. These are not efficiencies. They're rituals that tell the week. We intend to treat you kindly, starting here. Eat together if you can. If you cannot, set to the table anyway and FaceTime the friend who eats at odd hours and let the phone sit like an extra plate. Begin with a toast no matter what's in the glass. To the fact that we're here, or to the roast that took its time, or to the weather for trying something different. The week one gratitude that is not an accomplishment. The nap. The smell of basil. The way you laughed earlier. Gratitude makes the room bigger without any renovations. Teach children the craft of boredom. Don't call it that, call it finding something. Give them a box of ordinary, clothespins, string, paper bags, tape, 2 markers, a wooden spoon, a map you don't need. Their minds will find the game. If you live with teenagers, give them a job that matters and then do not fix it after them. If you live with elders, ask for instruction. How they folded fitted sheets. How they kept a plant alive for longer than some countries exist. How they used to wait for letters and didn't die of it. Include friends who work weekends and those whose holy clocks don't match yours. Rotate a weekday evening as their Sunday. Bring soup to the nurse after a stretch, swap childcare with the barista who closes, leave a note on the synagogue bulletin board, offering your Tuesday as a quiet porch for anyone who keeps Shabbat. Rest is a commons, it grows when shared. Build a Sunday box that lives on a shelf and only opens once a week. Inside, a deck of cards with soft corners, a puzzle missing exactly one piece, a pen that writes like it forgives you, a notebook labelled nothing urgent, paper map of your county with circles where you found good sitting, the letter from someone who wrote you when you needed it, a small tool that fixes small things, a bundle of recipes handwritten by people you miss. Open the box and choose one thing, let it choose the next hour. Practice saying no without apology and yes without performance. No to one more episode, yes to the walk, no to, can you just, yes to, sit with me a minute, no to the little itch that wants you to rearrange the bookshelf by colour, yes to the messy shelf that tells a story. No to the headline that is only a headline, yes to the story your neighbour tells for the 3rd time with one new detail that makes the whole thing worth hearing again. Find a place in town that has a bell and ask if you can ring it once at noon. Many places will say yes if someone asks kindly. If the answer is no, ring something else. The wind chime under the eave, the glass with a spoon, the idea that noon could be one note you share with yourself. Bells reset rooms. They say, begin again in a language everyone understands. Walk without belongings, keys in pocket for getting back in, nothing else. Notice what you reach for and cannot. Notice what you don't reach for and didn't miss. Pay attention to the particular relief that arrives around minute 12 when the map of your neighbourhood fits inside your chest and your legs are doing exactly their old job, which is to be legs. If work presses, place it on a stool by the door and tell it your hours like you would a friendly dog at a picnic. You stay. I'll come back. Work respects what you respect. It is built of agreements. Make one with yourself. Put it on a sticky note if you must, simple as a stop sign. Then honour it as if someone were watching. Someone is the future self who will thank you. Adopt a craft that can be started and stopped without cursing. Knitting, whittling, etching, crosswords, model boats, bread, origami, planting cuttings in jars, pressing leaves between paper, copying a poem by hand, mending a knee, building a birdhouse, writing a single page for no one. Let your hands learn the loop of process without the whip of progress. Good enough is a holy phrase in the right light. Designate a quiet hour and make it visible. A candle lit on the mantel at 4 means voice is low. A scarf tied to the porch rail at 2 means reading time for anyone who wants a chair. A small flag in the plant by the window means nap negotiations are closed for business. Symbols are helpful to minds that default to habit. They turn intention into furniture. Learn the local quiet schedule and lean into it. The museum's late Sunday opening, the pool's empty first hour, the bus route that's a moving observation deck at dusk, the bowling alley between leagues, the park during the game, the diner just after church when the pancake griddle gets a second wind. Places have their own respiratory systems, find the exhale. If you are in a position to lead, do it with rest, not just results. Send a company-wide note that says, "No Sunday email unless someone's safety depends on it." Mean it, model it, praise the person who waited until Monday. Shopkeepers, choose closed by choice and see who thanks you. Coaches, put one blank square on the schedule and call it care. Pastors and imams and rabbis and sangha leaders, leave 1 minute of actual silence and resist the urge to explain it. The world will fill it with exactly what it needs. If your town still has a bell that marks hours, ask the keeper to bring back the long noon note. If your town does not, stand in your yard at the top of the hour and breathe like a bell. 4 in, hold 6 out, and consider that a practice available to anyone within sight. If even one neighbour notices and slows by 10%, you have invented a civic tradition. Keep a ledger of comforts, not the Instagram kind, the grocery kind. Write down what worked. Leaving the phone upstairs until after coffee. Walking to the river even in cold, letting the stew run long while you read. Telling the kid you were going to sit and do nothing and inviting them to join. Turning off the big lights, answering, "What did you do today?" with, "I was alive." Add to it weekly. Consult it when the day feels slippery. Traditions are just ledgers written in the same hand, often enough to become law. If you pray, pray. If you don't, label something prayer and do it anyway. A list of names folded once and kept in your pocket. A leaf held up to the light. A sentence written at the top of a page. Help, thanks, wow! And the courage to fill the rest. Knees on a mat. Shoes by the door, hands in soapy water blessing plates. The shape is not the point. The pause is. Tell the week a story about itself that is kinder than the truth, and watch how often the truth steps up to match. We are a household that rests on Sundays. We are a block with a porch hour. We are a team that honours recovery. We are a shop that closes early for family dinner. We are a person who reads on the steps. Stories have governance. The more you repeat them, the more they pass resolutions. When evening arrives, don't argue with it. Dim before dark. Lamps, not overheads. Lamps with shades that make pools the room can hop between. Wash the day off your wrists. Change into the older shirt that loves you. Eat simply if you ate richly earlier. Richly if you forgot. Step outside once more, even if only to stand. Count the windows on your street that glow. Wish all those strangers a good week with your whole chest and no sound. If there is leftover work inside your head, tuck it like a child. We are not done, but we are done for now. Use a voice that works on you. If it does not, borrow one. The voice of someone who loved you and would have told you to sit down. Sit down. Put your feet on something that forgives. Fold the blanket. Choose the next small kindness. A glass of water on the bedside table. Tomorrow's coffee measured. A note where your morning self will find it. You're fine. Go slow. Bringing Sunday back is not a campaign, it's a practice. It happens inside single rooms and spreads by rumour. It requires no ordnance, only repetition. It fails sometimes and returns easily to its work. It can be carried in a pocket. It tastes like toast buttered to the corners. It sounds like a door closing softly because you remembered to guide it with your hand. It looks like a chair turned to face a window and a person in it, breathing, with time enough to see the light change on the sill. Before we go, take one more slow breath with me. If any part of this quiet day tugged at a memory, church bells in the distance, a porch swing, a roast in the oven, carry a small piece into your week. Maybe it's a lamp instead of a screen at night, a short walk without headphones, or a closed for the ordinary miracle hour on your door. I'd love to hear your Sunday stories. What did it look, sound, or smell like where you grew up? Or if you're bringing Sunday back in your own way, what's your pocket of peace? Drop it in the comments so we can borrow each other's ideas. If this helped you slow down, tap like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs a gentler week. Sleep well, take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.